This is episode 127 of the Trauma Coaching for Latter-day Saints podcast. The waking is the hardest part. I'm your host, Danita Bremer. I'm on a mission to help members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints heal from trauma. I'm on my healing journey, and I'm a triple certified life coach. Take a deep breath, slip your AirPods in, and come on a walk with me to learn how to heal and find lasting joy. Hello, everyone. If you are watching from YouTube, the background is different. That is because I'm coming to you from my mountain house. My husband and I are here for a couple of days to do some deep cleaning and painting and just some touch ups that need to be done. And we're finishing up some work before we get to that. So, I had an experience, it's been about a week and a half now that has been percolating in my mind. And I feel like this experience is going to be a turning point of sorts for me. So I wanted to share it with you because I do think that it relates to my trauma healing. And so we'll just see how this goes. I don't have fully formed thoughts, but I do have a list of 10 things. And relating to the title, "The Waking is the Hardest Part," that is coming from that Tom Petty song, "The Waiting," where he says, "The waiting is the hardest part." Well, we're talking about waking up here. And I do have an old podcast episode about sleep shame. And for the longest time, pretty much my whole life, I have really struggled with um, being a morning person. Should I say it that way? I've just said, oh, I'm a night owl. But recently, I have come to figure out where this piece, this puzzle piece, lands in the landscape of the trauma that I have endured. And so that is what I hope to talk about today. And I hope that it just is validating if you also struggle with getting out of bed in the morning. Um, anyway, let's just get to it. So, the main idea here is that I just want to tell some stories from my own life about waking up and why that has been difficult. And if you listen regularly to the podcast, you know that I am working really intently this year on waking up and getting up earlier. And it is bringing up a lot of my stuff. It is a tedious, long process. I have already wanted to give up, and we're just 4 months into the year. But I am continuing to move forward, and it has been a learning experience. The other day, I was in the shower, and of course, the shower is the place where we get all of our inspiration and where all of our ideas and creativity flow to us. But this day, it was like a light bulb moment or a lightning bolt moment. That's what it felt like, a lightning bolt moment, where I just kind of recognized some experiences that I've had that consciously I knew about. I knew these stories, but all of a sudden I could kind of feel the weight of them. I could feel how they play into my trauma healing journey. And it is about waking up and getting out of bed. And it was like this moment in the shower where almost kind of like your life flashes before your eyes, not my whole life, but just dozens of memories of waking up in an experience that was scary or uncomfortable or full of resistance in some way. And then I was just like, oh, no wonder waking up is difficult for me, right? So I loosely ordered these experiences from youngest age to oldest age, but some of them have happened across many ages. And I just want this to give you a context. Honestly, I'm just operating out of my intuition here and feeling like someone out there really needs to hear this. So the very first memory I have that has to do with waking up is I remember a nightmare that I had when I think I was 3 or 4 years old. In my nightmare, this wicked witch was chasing me, and it was just very high emotion and very scary. And when I woke up from that nightmare, I was lying on the floor outside of my parents' bedroom. So I wasn't in their bedroom door was closed, and I was on the floor with my blanket, or I think maybe it was a sleeping bag. And I just remember feeling a lot of emotion, feeling a lot of fear. Um, I woke up literally, my legs were kicking and I was like thrashing and screaming, and nobody came. My parents didn't hear me. So that was really scary. So if you're a person who has experienced nightmares, I'm not generally a person, at least after that, who has experienced nightmares. My dreams are very vivid, but they're usually not scary, so to speak. But that is one of my earliest memories, is that nightmare. The second one is also it's around age 5. And just this actually several memories of, I don't necessarily remember immediately waking up, but being awake in the morning and being alone. So my parents were there in the house sleeping. My sister was there sleeping, and I was awake by myself, and I didn't want to wake anyone up. And so I would turn on the TV and watch cartoons until people woke up. But very much like a lonely feeling, and um feeling like I needed to be quiet, like I couldn't just be me as a kid, right? So there's another experience. Um, I remember when I was in kindergarten, I was in the afternoon kindergarten class, so it probably started at 12:30 or 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon. And I remember several times waking up to my mother dressing me. So I could, like, as I was waking up, I could feel her moving my legs or my arms, putting them through sleeves and through pant legs, and having this kind of like, this like resistance, right? Like, is it time to get ready for school already? And not really wanting to. And this kind of speaks to something that I think as humans we do a lot. I think it's normal, but it does play a role in trauma, which is this idea of pushing through, right? Of like, I don't really want to do that, but I have to make myself do it. So pushing through. And especially when you live, generally speaking, in a freeze response, your pushing through is working against what your body really wants and needs. Another experience around the age of 5, which I'm pretty sure I have talked about on the podcast before. It's probably a really early episode before episode 55. And that is when at age 5, I was awake, my parents were not, and my dad's alarm started going off, and I didn't know what to do. I remember standing there paralyzed next to my dad's side of the bed, looking at him, looking at his alarm, and being like, he's a grown up. Maybe he wants to sleep, but then why would he set an alarm? Maybe he forgot that the alarm was set, and maybe he wants to sleep, and maybe it's okay. And just going back and forth in my head, trying to decide, do I wake him up? Do I not wake him up? If I wake him up, maybe he'll get mad at me. And then he woke up before I was able to wake him up, and he rushed to work. He was late to work, and he came back, I don't know, 30, 60 minutes later, and he had been fired for being late to work one time. He was a garbage man. So from what I know of, garbage pickups, they usually happen early in the morning, not always, but I probably was awake pretty early by myself, right? And I had so much guilt and shame from that one experience. For 30 years, I felt guilty. I felt like I should have woken him up and our lives would be so much different. So it's not an experience of me waking up, but definitely associated with waking up and early morning and fear and shame and all of that. Around the age of 7. So if we have little ears in the room, we might want to turn the podcast off for now, just giving you a little warning here. But when I was 7 years old, I woke up on Christmas morning and I was all excited. I was like, it's Christmas in my head. And we lived in this little trailer that was like, I don't know, 50 feet long or whatever. And you could see from one end of the trailer down to the other, just one straight shot. And I was all excited and I got up and then I saw my mom arranging the gifts under the Christmas tree. And then I knew the truth about Santa. And I was disappointed and sad. So, probably within about a minute or so of waking up, I felt some intense negative emotion. Now, that in and of itself is not traumatic. All kids learn this at some point in their lives. But the fact that it happened for me right upon waking up, I don't think is coincidental, right? Like, I think it just feeds into this theme of waking up is scary and hard, right? I pegged this experience around age 8, but I think it happened several times over the years. My sister, who was 2 years younger than me, she struggled with wetting the bed, which is actually super normal. Two of my kids really struggled with wetting the bed until they were about 10 years old. I've talked to doctors about it. Very normal, runs in families. Nothing to be ashamed about, but yet we do, right? We're ashamed about it. And I remember waking up to feeling, and my sister and I shared a bed, and to feeling, oh, she wet the bed again. And just knowing that she would be getting yelled at. And as a sibling, like it's really hard to watch your sister get yelled at and for something that doesn't seem like she has much control over. And just those feelings of like dread and oh, right. I know that happened several times. One time, my parents spanked my sister with a belt, and I was so upset about it that I had to like leave. I had to like walk away and not be around. And I just felt like it was so unfair. I'm sure there were even times when I wet the bed, right? I don't remember specific times, but just I do remember specifically waking up before school and my sister had wet the bed and just knowing she was going to get in trouble and that I was going to feel for her. Oh, so there's another experience. Um, I put this experience around ages 9 to 18, probably happened all throughout my life, but I remember waking up. My dad, if ever he woke us up, which was fairly rare, but it did happen regularly, he would wake us up by whistling a very loud, shrill whistle. It was this immediate, almost like if you imagine getting woken up by the smoke detector or something like that, that like feeling, right? And that was so unpleasant. And also when my dad woke us up, he was like, "You're awake, you move right now." There was like no transition between waking up and like being up. And that always felt really abrupt and cold. And I just hated it so, so much. Um, he might have learned that from his dad because I have an experience. I think I was about 12 years old. I stayed with my grandparents for the summer and I would sleep with my grandma in her bed. And we were just very close. And it wasn't anything, I don't think it was anything weird. It just, she allowed me to sleep with her. My grandparents did not sleep in the same bedroom. And we would just stay up talking and chatting. And sometimes she would read. And so I would read. And it was actually a very pleasant time. But one morning, my grandfather did not like it that I would sleep in so late. And of course, my grandparents had the typical old person routine where they would wake up super early at like 4 or 5 in the morning. They would get up and do things. They would go gardening or whatnot. And then they would take naps at, noon or 1 or 2, and then they wouldn't be able to go to sleep. And so they would stay up. And it was just like their sleep schedule was scattered throughout the whole day. So my grandfather did not like it that I would sleep in until 9 or 10, probably later if I was allowed. And one morning he froze marbles and he brought them to the bed where I was sleeping and he dumped them on me. And that is how I woke up. So talk about a experience. It was so awful. I felt embarrassed and ashamed. I can feel that emotion coming up right now, just thinking about it. And yeah, I think it was actually quite traumatic. I don't think my grandfather had extremely, you know, cruel intentions. I think he just, wanted to teach his granddaughter a lesson kind of thing. Um, but obviously he wasn't very trauma informed. And my experience with that was not good, right? Speaking of this kind of pushing through energy that I talked about with waking up to my mother dressing me in kindergarten, in high school, I actually lived within walking distance to the school. And I would set my alarm for about 10 minutes before the bell at school rang, maybe 15 minutes. And I would have to wake up and immediately I would have to get up, get dressed, brush my hair, brush my teeth, go. I never ate breakfast. I had a few minutes to go and it definitely felt like this pushing through, like I just have to go to school. I don't want to go to school, but I have to go to school. It's what we do. And now I can kind of see how maybe that wasn't the healthiest thing to do, but I was waking myself up. I didn't have additional support kind of thing, right? It's one thing to wake yourself up because you choose that. My teenagers choose that. They wake themselves up. I'm happy to wake them up, but they prefer to wake up to an alarm. So when we have agency around it, it isn't the same, right? And then this is the last one that applies to basically all ages from probably newborn, probably in utero, even to until I left home at age 18, which is going to sleep and or waking up to my parents fighting, yelling, screaming, throwing things at each other. I could hear like physically fighting each other, that kind of thing. And just, I remember trying to fall asleep with my fingers in my ears, going la 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 la, like breathing really loud to try to drown out the sound of them fighting. I remember one time it was actually going to sleep in the evening. They were fighting and it was a hellacious fight. And I took my two sisters, my sister, I was probably 13 or 14 years old. And so my one sister was probably 11 or 12. And then I had another sister who's probably like 2 or 3. And I just took them outside and I said, okay, we're leaving. And I remember like hugging them, we had this little tiny patch of grass. It was summertime, I believe, because it was warm in the evening. It was dark. The moon or the stars were out. And I put this sleeping bag down and I remember huddling with them and telling them that it was going to be okay and trying to reassure them. Sorry, I try to avoid getting emotional, but trying to reassure them that everything was going to be okay and that we were fine. It was like an adventure to sleep outside. And then we lived in rattlesnake territory, and my little, young brain started thinking about what if a snake comes and curls up with us? And so then I got really afraid. And if you know anything about like medical trauma, the way we fall asleep is often the way we wake up, like that energy, whatever. If we cry ourselves to sleep, we'll oftentimes wake up and feeling that like like we're crying again, right? And so also these experiences apply to going to sleep as well. However, if there's fighting and discord and fear when you're falling asleep, then that it's likely to have that experience when you're waking up as well. And so while I consciously knew these stories, I consciously knew, my logical brain knew that these things happened to me. It wasn't until less than 2 weeks ago that it sort of like it clicked not in my mind, in my body. It was like, all of a sudden I could feel the weight of all of these several experiences waking up. And it was like my body was finally ready to admit how hard, how scary this was. And I could like feel it. And I was in the shower and I just started crying. I could feel these experiences and the weight of them on me. And with the knowledge I have about trauma and how it gets stored in our bodies, and that sometimes we don't remember things until it's time to remember them, until we have capacity to remember and be with them. I It was just this moment of like, oh, no wonder why waking up is so hard for me. And it felt so validating. It felt like a missing piece of a puzzle. And I just want to say, like, this is what somatic work does for us. The things that we logically know and understand find their place in the landscape of our emotions and our inner selves. And we feel like, oh, I make sense. Like up until that point, I was telling myself, just get out of bed. It's easy. You just get up, right? Why do you have this problem? And it was so easy for me to shame myself. I really have been working on not shaming myself and speaking to myself with so much kindness. But it didn't make sense to me. Like my logical brain was like, why is this so hard for me? So working somatically, and I haven't even worked directly with this experience of waking up somatically. I mean, I have been trying to make waking up a little more of a gentle, spacious experience. But it's like slowly our bodies warm to these memories, these logical knowing, logical understanding. And when our bodies are ready, the logical understanding drops into our body and then it becomes kind of a felt knowing, a felt validation. It seems to be almost like beyond words for me, but you slowly are able to acknowledge things on a visceral, felt level that you were only able to acknowledge on a logical level before. And then you become just a smidge, a hair more available to feeling. And those little tiny changes, that's what changes our lives, right? That's what like shifts how we feel inside of ourselves. So these are just some examples. This is one example from my life that just is super fresh and real that I wanted to share with you. If this is something you struggle with or something similar, right? If you understand something on a logical level, but it's just like you keep butting your head up against a wall and you don't quite get it, I just want to invite you to try out somatic coaching. And on the free session, what my desire for you is to really feel a sense of safety, safety with another person, but also safety in yourself, and to really allow, and it doesn't always happen on that free session, but a first step toward really feeling safe with someone else and feeling safe in your own body and feeling connected to yourself just 1 degree more than you're able to on your own. I have one spot for private coaching open. And then, of course, we have the group, which, oh my gosh, the best people are in there and they're so courageous and so supportive of each other. I love the group. So if this sounds like something that you need in your life, I invite you to sign up for a free session. That's enough for now, and so are you. Thank you for listening, sharing, and leaving ratings and reviews. If you're ready to address your own trauma with my support, go to danitabrummer.com to schedule a free trauma assessment call. Until next time, go be yourself and follow the spirit.